Education fiscal year 2012 proposed operating budget work session. Before I begin, please turn off your wireless communications as they tend to interfere with the taping of the meeting. Also want to take this opportunity to thank our community who has been very diligent in their responses to the board, asking for help, asking for support with regard to our other legislators. And as far as sending suggestions, recommendations, coming to the public hearings, we're very much appreciative of that. And we are also pleased today that Dr. Height has a proposal and more things to give us to help us as we deliberate further on this particular budget. Today, the sole purpose of this meeting is for us to discuss those changes that Dr. Height has proposed for the budget, and also for board members to ask questions to get more clarity on some of those issues. Ms. LeBon, can you call the roll, please? Thank you.
Mr. Armwood?
Present.
Ms. Boston? Present. Mr. Barrows?
Aye.
Ms. Eubanks?
Present.
Ms. Higgins?
Present.
Ms. Johnson? Ms. Waller?
Present.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Ms. Beck? Ms. Jacobs?
Here. Thank you. Yield to Dr. Height.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. It is our opportunity today to provide for the board a presentation, and this presentation is actually going to go through several categories. If we can get the presentation up. The first part of this will really be to define revenue sources, and we think it's important to, as many times as we can, to remind everyone where our funds come from. Then we want to demonstrate how we allocate all of those resources. We will also have an opportunity to talk about reorganizations as a part of this budget proposal, and talk from the perspective of how we will deliver services with a new organizational structure. And then to share with the board information from the budget reduction worksheet tool, and then finalize this presentation with a budget reduction summary. However, I think it's very important to begin with a set of priorities. So I'm going to skip around inside of this presentation. The priorities inside of this budget really is to maintain some of the structures that we have in place right now. Inside, we have 5 goals, and those goals are high student achievement. And then in order to have that high student achievement, we're really talking about effective and capable instruction in all of our classrooms. We also want to really focus in on the goal 5, which is effective and efficient operations. In other words, what do we do in order to ensure that we're not having this exercise every year? So inside of this current budget proposal and some of the information that you will hear today, we want to, as much as we can, maintain at current class sizes. And that is directly related to goals 1, 2, and 5. That means we want to really minimize the impact of increasing class sizes by 2, and we intend to do that by targeting any additional resources to that goal. We also want to retain our most highly effective teachers and leaders, and once again, those are goals 1, 2, and 5. And that means that inside of our proposal, I have not proposed furloughs for teachers or administrators. And we think that we will have for the board very soon, hopefully by our Thursday meeting, a retirement incentive to minimize the layoffs inside of the proposal. The next set of priorities are really defined around protecting our work to sustain progress toward college and career readiness. That means we're looking for at least opportunities to restore specialty-centered transportation, but at the very least to have a more cost-effective system for transporting those students. And then the work that is occurring inside of their secondary school reform. Inside of efficient and effective, that goal of efficient and effective services, really paying attention to performance management. And inside of this budget process, that means matching the number of positions to our student enrollment and more closely aligning those two. Measuring the effectiveness of everything we do against stated targets, and looking for cost-effective ways to deliver services both to schools and to students. And as we have informed the board, all of our negotiated agreements are up for renegotiations. It's that time, so they're up for renewal. And we really want to use this opportunity to address the compensation structures inside and across our system. That doesn't necessarily mean that we pay people less, but what it means is that we have a compensation system that speaks more directly to the fact that we should be valuing teachers in their work. And in order to do that, we need strong built-in leadership. So we have to have a compensation structure that supports and communicates that. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Stansky, and he's going to walk us through both the revenue sources and then the expenditures, and then the board worksheet tool. And after that, we will have an opportunity to respond to questions. I know many of the board members have submitted questions about things that we've proposed. We're also going to use this time to talk about a couple of changes that we've made in response to a lot of the comments from the public. And we have then looked at different ways to deliver services moving forward. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Stansky.
Thank you, Dr. Haidt. Members of the board, good morning. This is a slide you normally see, but this is updated given our current revenue picture. As you see, right now we're looking at about 54% of our budget coming from the state, 39% coming from the county. Federal government, with the stimulus a couple years ago, that percentage was up around 11, 12%. It's now back down to what it normally is around 7%. And then the other, less than 1%, it was board sources. And again, it's another a slide just to depict that, where most of our costs reside, and obviously it is in employees, where you see 65% of our budget is salary and wages, and roughly 18% is fringe benefits, which is your insurance and things of that nature. So we're going to walk through for a minute the various reorganizations that have been proposed in this budget. This is, again, with the mindset towards, reducing costs and and identifying efficiencies where possible in central office to allow us to really minimize the impact of budget reductions in schools. As you can see, with the reorganizations and reductions, we're saving roughly $34 million out of central office with in a reduction of 283 FTEs. The first, again, is a merger of the Fiscal Compliance Department and the Budget and Management Services Department. This will allow us to reduce 3 FTEs and save us nearly $300,000. The work of fiscal compliance will still go on, which is mainly centered around data quality, and the implementation of student-based budgeting for FY13. But that will just now be done in-house in the budget office and not in a separate department. Next is the merger of the benefits office with the Department of Payroll. We're not only seeing savings in the reduction of FTE, but we're going to now more direct deposit will all be set up online. We're moving towards if you're on direct deposit, that you will no longer receive a pay stub. It'll just be all on self-service. W-2s will also be on self-service. So we're looking to get more online, less mailings, and a reduction of 5 FTEs and saving us nearly $450,000. And we feel like the way we're going to have it structured, it'll be a one-stop shop for all employees for any pay or benefit-related issues. Next is a reorganization of the Department of Communications. We currently have 21 FTE. We're looking to reduce that down to 14. We feel like with the size of the district that count is more comparable to get the message out, essentially. The department will be organized into 4 areas: publications, media, web, and television. And that the reorganization here saves the district nearly $560,000. So this is the big one. This is the area office reorganization that touches a variety of departments. We're looking to go down to 3 associate superintendents and then what we call 14 local or community instructional superintendents. This is with the mindset towards lowering the number of schools these local superintendents have to oversee. Right now, they see anywhere from 40 to 45 schools. We just feel like that's just too many to provide support and leadership development to principals. This new structure will allow us to have a range of anywhere from 10 to 15 schools that these individuals will be in support of. This also includes a reorganization of Title I and school improvement to, again, align it more with gearing it more towards just supporting schools. And then finally, it takes school leadership and teacher leadership from academics over to human capital department and reduces the FTE count from 100 to about 8 FTE to really then, so PD will then become more school focused, more, the PD will be more embedded in the schools as opposed to in central office. With all these reorganizations, the cost savings is around $5 million and a reduction of overall 57 FTE.
Matt, can you walk back to the previous slide?
Yep.
And one of the points that I wanted to emphasize here is that this changes how we do business with schools. And this changes our ability to be responsive to needs of individuals with respect to schools. And I want to explain that statement. We now have regional offices that have staffs included. And those staffs handle a sundry of things now. They deal with direct support to schools. They do a lot of the constituent-related types of activities for schools. In other words, if someone has a problem with a school, and in some cases with a class, they will reach out to the local administrative office, and that administrative office would then work that down back to the school. In this organization, in this reorg, there's only one person that has the responsibility of 15 schools. So we're removing all of those other structures inside of those departments, and the purpose and the goal of that really is to build the capacity of the instructional leader at the school level. And this will allow for more frequent monitoring at individual schools, but it takes away some of those structures that people have become accustomed to. It takes away the ability to handle a large number of phone calls from schools, and we will have to find another way in order to deliver that type of service, because this individual will be responsible, as I indicated before, for the developing and monitoring and coaching and mentoring principals, and the evaluation of the principals, their work, providing them critical feedback. And the purpose is really to get those individuals into schools more often than they are now, and they cannot do that with 45 schools. And that's why we're moving that number to 15, but we're also eliminating all of the other staff associated with those regional offices.
As part of the area office reorganization, there's some parts of the high school consortium that will then be moved over to curriculum instruction and to a new organization called College and Career Ready, and that's managing AP, IB, AVID, those programs. And as I said, the cost savings for that was captured in the area office reorganization. This is the school improvement and Title I aspect of the reorganization. It's essentially combining these two departments into one office of state and federal programs, which will have a supervisor of Title I, supervisor of school improvement. We're going to see a reduction of 18 FTEs in the Title I office, which means that money will then just be deployed to schools for principals to use as opposed to being budgeted centrally. And then a reduction of 13 FTEs in the area of school improvement. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a reorganization of teacher leadership and school leadership, which will move over to the Department of Human Capital. It is a reduction of 92 FTEs, which we had reduced some FTEs in the December proposal. We went from 100 to 60, and now that 60 moves it down to 8 FTEs, and will be now transferred over to Department of Human Capital. We plan on, with the reductions, helping to supplement a lot of this with using Title II and Race to the Top to help offset the reductions in this area. And finally is a reorganization of plant operations and maintenance. They would combine the function of these two departments into one. It reduces nearly 66 FTEs and saves us nearly $3.9 million. So I wanted to walk through for a minute some of the changes to the original proposal that we made in February. There's a revision to JROTC. The original proposal was to essentially cut the program in half, reducing 41 FTEs. We've now set up a structure which we can, go more in depth in today, that essentially keeps the program at every high school, but just limits the number of FTEs each high school has. So what it may do is might limit some of the course offerings, but every high school will still have the program. And I think every high school will at least have 2 FTEs, and then Forestville will still keep its complement, as will Oxon Hill. And so we feel like it's a good compromise. It reduces the savings down to, I believe, 1.4, as we originally had savings of 2.8. But we feel like we can now still deliver the high quality program and still save a significant amount of money. Next is a change to evening high school. We have it structured with tuition, and it will be at 2 sites. The FTEs will be reduced from 7. I think we have 4 FTEs now. The cost savings will be around $1.8 million, and so we feel like, again, we can provide the service that we've been providing before in a more cost-effective manner. Unfortunately, this is an add to the budget, given potentially the amount of employees that we may have to lay off. Naturally, your contribution to unemployment insurance will have to go up. Right now, projecting about a $1.6 million increase in what we have to pay for unemployment insurance, just in anticipation of the fact that there may be a fair amount of folks who that we have to unfortunately let go. Next is an adjustment to student services. There's a vacant executive level position that was in the chief's office that has been identified for reduction, so that's saving us an additional $160,000 on top of the $670,000 that was already identified in the area of student services. And then we also had made some technical adjustments in these 5 areas. Class size, we, as we go through this, we're continuing running the formula. We ran the formula, and we had originally thought a reduction of 259 FTEs. When we reran it, it was only a reduction of 254. So we had to add a little bit of money back for that. Healthcare savings, we initially had $3.5 million in as savings to negotiate with our current provider. In reviewing that proposal, I just didn't feel comfortable that we could probably get to that number. I feel like the number I have now, which is 1.9 million, is just more in line with what we can identify to get from negotiating with them. And that's in 2 areas. One is stuff we've really already negotiated with them on that we just haven't acted on. And then we're concluding an audit on claims for retirees that we feel like can save us around $800,000 to $900,000. Reading recovery, we had staff go back, and when they actually ran it using the actual salaries of those individuals, it actually saved, right now we had a savings of $3 million in there initially. When we reran the numbers, the savings jumped up to about 4.5. We were using the average before when we came back and looked at the actual salaries, because these are some of, more of our veteran type teachers. The savings actually jumped up to about 4.5 million for reading recovery.
Wanted to add another comment about reading recovery, because since we've had the public hearings, I've also asked for some information from the Maryland State Department of Education about using other direct aid for the purpose of providing reading recovery to our high-need students. Their original response was that should be something that is allowed, but we're waiting on their official confirmation of that. So in other words, it would be, we would have the ability to, if granted permission from the Maryland State Department of Education, we would be permitted to use Title I funds to target reading recovery to our most impacted students. We haven't received the official word on that yet, but we're waiting for that. And as I said, the preliminary response was that we think that that would be an appropriate expense for Title I without creating supplanting issues, but we don't have the official word yet.
The Schmidt Center, this is sort of a full disclosure change. The savings was, from that reduction, it was embedded in two areas, in the academic central office and in the Schmidt Center cost proposal. So what I did is back that number out of the academics cost savings and put it all in the Schmidt Center. So really, the savings is around $1 million for the Schmidt Center. I know we had targeted it as $600,000, but the true savings is $1 million. It doesn't change what our bottom line was. It just moved it out of the academics cost saving area and put it into the Schmidt Center, where it was should have been appropriately coded. And then when, again, looking through at the area office reorganization, I had, we had identified FTEs that were initially supposed to be cut that should not have been cut in the proposal. And so that was a slight technical adjustment as well. And then there are things that I apologize that I did not put on this slide that we have changed also on the revenue side. We are going to propose a building fee increase for the use of our facilities, $2 per hour increase, and plus a CPI increase of 1%. We feel like that'll get us an additional $547,000. I did put in our proposal for evening high school, the tuition costs, which is, we feel, $312,000. And then the board will see soon proposals to have charter schools lease some of our school facilities, and if that goes through, we feel like that will get us an additional $592,000 in revenue. So those are the changes from the proposal from last time. As Dr. Height alluded to earlier, we do have outstanding questions. I apologize. We are working through them as best as we can. You will have them all before you vote, and so staff is working diligently to respond to all the questions. Maybe there's a good chance we can respond to them verbally today. You also have, we had sent to you earlier this week, a worksheet with our proposal plus possible alternatives. So you could play budget analyst for a day if you want. So hopefully you found that tool helpful. And as Dr. Height said, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, colleagues, as we begin deliberations, we are going to adhere to the 5-minute, 3-minute rule, which means that it's working. The buzzer's working, which also means that once we get past that, we can do additional rounds, but I'll need a motion to do so. But this is such a crucial time and it's really important, so I'm asking us to actually listen to each other's questions and be very attentive to the questions that we're each asking, so that we can get as much information in as much time as possible, and so that our public who are listening and intently wants to know the details will also get the benefit of our deliberations. I first have Mr. Harris and then Ms. Johnson.
First, I just want to say thank you for putting ROTC back in the budget, making sure it's at almost every school where enough students can support the can support the program. And evening high school, I'm in full support of having a south and a north site. But I still have questions about the online classes. I talked to students and they just said, for me, it would not work. So I really want to see how much would it cost if we were to take out the online classes. How much would that be? How much of a budget hit would that be? And then this last thing I have is communications. We made it the board has made it very clear that currently our communications, we need to see a step up. But you're going to be reducing the FTEs for next year. Do you really believe that the communications can get our message out about our students? Can take pictures? Can do the science expos? Do the public service announcements? Answer the questions for the medias with 14 FTEs. Will it harm us or will it help us reducing it? So those are my questions.
Yeah, I will respond to those, Mr. Harris. And so the first was evening high school, and you were concerned about the online courses. And I want to reiterate, and we've talked about this a couple of times before, online seems to have formed legs of its own and just kind of became a part of the evening high school replacement. We were always talking about online as a method to deliver content. There will still be individuals who would have direct connections to students. And so we'll still have teachers, and teachers will be assisting students. The content with which students will be exposed would be online. So in other words, students will still have to go to a site, unlike an online class where you register from home or some other place. Students would have to have class time, just as they do now, and students will have individuals who will be working directly with them. The exposure to the content or the curriculum is the online part of that, and that's using the Maryland online course.
So, a student will pretty much a student will go home, log on the computer, read. It's just like reading the textbook. Then maybe once a week, twice a week, they'll go into a classroom and they'll go over the content.
Actually, Mr. Harris, we've worked on this proposal quite a bit this week to refine it. We have identified every single course that a child would need in evening high school in order to complete. We've also identified a completed course. We have staff who will be responsible for providing that instruction. We have scaled back, though, significantly to only cover those classes that a child would actually need to graduate and to receive that completer. So we'll have 21 FTEs as second assignments of instructors to provide that instruction for students. But there are some pieces that will be different. For example, the AVP courses that we traditionally have taught every day, we would actually go to more of a boot camp scenario where children would come in one Saturday a month and receive assistance with their project as opposed to that being a separate class. So we've tried to streamline the operations of evening high school so they won't be totally dependent on online content. Instead, students will actually have that face-to-face interaction with the teacher, but we've streamlined the course offerings. And we've also done some things around capping so that there are a certain amount of students that we'll have to have in order for a class to make, for example, which is what we do in college scenarios as well, just to make sure we're leveraging our resources appropriately.
And I would love to do a small simulation of that one day, hopefully before the budget gets voted on or before it comes back to the board, just to see how that looks for the students. Because I have a PGRAS meeting in a couple weeks. I think it's actually next week. And I'm going to be talking to them about the budget. And that's a very big concern. It's the online classes. So I would like to have more information about that. And then the last question was, I think,
on
communications.
And one of the things that, in looking at this, Mr. Harris, what we have to do is establish priorities across the system. And the whole purpose, and as you can see, priority one was really to look at protecting that critical piece, which is between teacher and student. Now, our ability to communicate what we do becomes an important part of that. But the ability to do that is more in how we do it as opposed to how many people do it. And I think that we could very easily construct a message with a district their size with 14 people, making sure that we have the right people constructing the messages, and that we use the right venues for communicating that message. So this is not, I don't think the number of individuals inside of communications really determines that. I think the message and how proactively we begin to talk about our brand in Prince George's County has more to do with our ability to communicate than anything else. So to answer your question, yes, I do think we can provide the improve on our communications with 14 people.
Ms. Johnson?
Dr. Hyde, at 1:30 this morning, I was sitting in my den because I couldn't sleep. It's been weeks that we've been wrangling and looking at this. And I wrote a brief statement that I wanted to address to you as the superintendent of schools. But more fervently for me, it was really prayerful that you would have heard the concerns that I had and many others have. And so the request that I wanted to make today to you, there were 4 of them. You have answered 2 of them. You have found a way in this budget for children for whom reading is such a puzzle. You have assisted them in unlocking that puzzle and found a way in this budget to continue for those children to be able to have mastery of their subjects, and I thank you. That has been a critical concern of mine. The other request that I was going to make was about night school. Those young people have had such a difficult journey to get to that high school diploma. And fervently, I had hoped that you would hear these young people cannot be abandoned. They must be able to gain that diploma for a brighter future. And so I thank you for having heard that message. The other request that I was going to ask of you is that you find a way in this budget for those children who are most vulnerable, whose achievement at the single simplest task is measured in the tiniest increments, but they are no less significant. And so I am asking for you to find a way for means for those children whom we celebrate every day in the small, miraculous achievements that they make. They so desperately need our support. And lastly, my request is that with the difficulties we face, with looking at the changes that are going to be occurring in Prince George's public schools, that your budget is going to steer this school system to a safe harbor in which all of our students can and will achieve at high levels, and that at long last, Prince George's County is going to get the school system that our children deserve and that we have wanted. And so we all have to believe that you clearly want the best for our children. And I want to say to you, I do believe sincerely that you do. And I think that those changes that I heard this morning reaffirms you do hear us, you hear the public. Balancing this budget is hard work, but I do honestly believe that you are working to change the nature of how Prince George's delivers for its children for the 21st century. And so while I look forward to seeing how this budget can help our children in means, I do thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Boston?
Good evening. I have about 3 questions I need some clarity on. You mentioned in your slide, your presentation, Mr. Stansky, about the Title I department and school improvement. Can you explain to me in a little bit more detail how that reconstruction of that Title I department?
I'm gonna actually let Dr. Arbogast answer that question.
And school improvement, and what services will be allocated under the Title I back to the principals or to the schools as was indicated?
Ms. Boston, can we go ahead and get the other 2 questions, and then we could respond to all
The
of
other
them?
one was on transportation. Can you go into detail with your, a little bit more on how you proposed the cost for, as one of your proposals, the cost back to the state of parents on transporting for the specialty schools? And I think did you mention exactly what your 2 proposals were for the transportation for special schools? Can you do that for the public today so we would also know? And the other one was on the middle school athletics. I noticed that was not, wasn't anything mentioned about that. And I know we have, you have proposed charging athletic fee for the high schools. Could that be also an option for middle schools to try to retain that, or partnerships? I know we had talked about that before, maybe partnerships with parking planning.
Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Boston, I'm sorry. What we've noticed is as the state and federal reporting guidelines become more onerous, we've continued to add staff to address that at the central office level, and we're rethinking that. So we're actually saving very little money on the general fund side, but we're trying to divert money away from grown-ups dealing with simply compliance to the money directly at the schools. And the theory of action in the larger sense is that schools control the destiny of their children. So we're looking for ways to empower building principals. And so this move away from adults at central office managing federal guidelines to more money at the school level so that building principals can make decisions. So that's really the shift that you're seeing. Does it increase the workload for the folks left to deal with compliance? Absolutely. But we feel like it gives principals a little bit more leeway by simply diverting more cash to them. The other point that I want to make about this is that traditionally principals have used Title I staff for people to reduce class size. And we're asking principals to rethink that model just a little bit. We know class size is really important, but if central office is no longer providing services, how will principals use their Title I dollars to provide the necessary growth? And I'll give you an example. One would be around professional development. So instead of waiting for someone to come to your door to offer professional development, how can they, with the increased funding they have at their school level, how can they leverage that to increase the capacity of their students and their teachers? So it's really just a theory of action of taking money away from central office and sliding it more to the domain of the principals.
I'm not sure if that exactly answered my question. What I want to know is, you saying some of the other services, and I understand about the teacher development, because I think that some of that component is already in the principals. They already have that with that. But what I want to know is, like, I know under Title I, you know, you handle the SES tutoring program, the Parent Institute. All of that is all coming out of that Title I office. So if you're reconstructing that, then where are those type of programs going?
The SES doesn't change, and part of the principals' Title I budgets are actually have to be allotted to parent engagement. And we haven't wiped out the Title I office. We simply shrunken it. So there are still parent involvement specialists in the Title I office, but the expenditure, the line items are actually in the principal's budget rather than the central office budget.
So the principals will now decide which SES providers or how, with tutors?
They do now. They do now. And SES is actually approved at the state level. So a vendor has to get state approval, and then the principals actually make the determination about which SES will be in their schools.
Okay.
Another way, Ms. Boston, to think about that is that, so if the savings, and I don't know the exact amount, but I think it's $1.5, $1.6 million in savings in terms of the people who are providing those services now in central office. If you think about it this way, then that 1.5, 1.6 million then becomes a part of the pool of money that principals receive at the schools. So we're essentially moving that amount of money from the central office to become more school-based. So it would be more in each individual school's part for the purpose of supporting the needs of students in Title I schools. In transportation, there were two proposals. There are two proposals, and we're providing more details, but in order to look at ways to provide transportation, particularly to the specialty center schools, lottery schools, and test-in schools, we're working through two proposals. The first is to do a hub-based system. In the hub-based system, what we're attempting to do is really find central points across the county so individuals could bring their students, their children to those locations, and then from those locations we would have buses that move to all of the programs. That was the first option, and we're still pulling together that option to determine, how widespread we can make that, and how do we address all of the geographical areas inside the county. The second part of that is a fee-based system, and where we actually charge for a fee, and that fee is purposed on a sliding scale, and the sliding scale would be based on the parents' ability to pay. And so those were the two that we're looking at. We're still working through the designs of both models, but those were the two options in order to move forward with transportation to specialty center. We've heard suggestions for both. At the moment, I'm more concerned with the hub-based system because there are a lot of unanswered questions. For instance, who would supervise that area if it's not on their property? That's one. Or if a bus is late and parents have to leave to go off to work, what is the point of supervision or security there? So I'm a little more concerned right now at the moment with the hub-based system, and we have to see a lot more information with that. The fee-based system, on the other hand, would be based on an ability to pay a fee for having specialty center transportation. And if parents choose not to, they still have the ability to transport the students themselves. Oh, and then the middle school athletics, yes, it's not inside of the budget proposal because we never changed the recommendation to put it back. But yes, we could definitely do that as a fee-based approach, just as we do the high schools.
Thank you, Ms. Boston. Ms. Higgins?
Good morning. I have my questions or issues in three different categories. The one is to first talk in terms of additional revenue. So my one question would be, how much cost savings would we gain if we were to delay middle college?
We have 1.5 million budgeted for middle college.
Okay.
That's in addition. There were some monies budgeted in FY11 for startup, hiring a principal, things of that nature.
Right.
So overall, around $2 million if we delayed it.
Okay. In a previous presentation, there was talk about an ombudsman for $411,000. If we eliminate that, I'm assuming those savings would come back.
Yes, that would be the $400,000. One of the reasons that was
okay.
no longer on the presentation Ms. Higgins, is because as I talk about the restructuring of the regional offices,
Right.
they serve that purpose now. So the staffs that are located inside of all of those area
Right.
offices provide like an ombudsman-like service. What we were trying to do was make sure that we still had a point of contact for our parents and our community members and our citizens, so that we had a one-stop, if you will,
Right.
for people to communicate their issues with the system, and that office was responsible or would be responsible for bringing that to resolution. So the ombudsman's, that, I think it was 4 FTEs associated with that.
Right.
That replaces the 50 FTEs that are in area offices right now that are performing that task.
Okay, so if we were to, we're already cutting those 50 positions, so this would be to allow that function. So really, we would be cutting, in a sense, broadly 46 positions, keeping 4 to do the work of 50. Is that a right way to conceptualize it? And restructuring it.
The
I understand.
restructure of the area office includes the 4 FTEs for the ombudsman office.
Okay, so that money or the allocation for that money is included, I'm looking for dollars, obviously.
Mhm.
So that is already included in that $85 million gap?
Yes.
To do that. Okay. Somebody had emailed me, I'm going to ask this question, I'm not sure what I'm asking.
Yeah, but it would be
Okay.
additional. So if the elimination of those 4 FTEs, it would be
Be
more
400,
revenue.
okay.
Yes.
And is there a reason why that, I understand we're cutting communications, but it would seem to me that it would make sense to have those duties maybe go to the communications department? Is that another possibility?
It is a possibility. I mean, everything is a possibility.
Right, sure.
But we are, to the earlier question, how the message
Right.
and what we do, and with it would be a better possibility with the current structure because of the number of people that we
I
have
see.
inside of communications. Also, reducing communications and then giving them that task would be pretty significant, in my opinion.
Okay.
Particularly as we're asking fewer people to do more with respect to communications moving forward.
Okay.
Dr. Hyde, if I could add to that, in the conception of this office, when a constituent calls, the expectation is the problem needs to be assessed, and if it can be solved at that phone call. So really the way we envision this and the way the area offices work is that the person who takes the call knows enough about how schools work, how IEPs work,
Right.
how 504 plans work, that they can actually address and problem solve on the spot. And if they can't answer the question, they know exactly who to direct it to.
Right.
So we're seeing this much more as a problem-solving position rather than a router position.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to ask this question, I'm not quite sure what, but that there's a several million dollar increase in the maintenance of plants. That's more than last year's. And is there a way we could go back to last year's number?
So there's really two areas that we're seeing the increase in. This is FY12 will be the first year of our lease payment for the energy performance contract that was agreed to last year by the board. This is the contract that we essentially are borrowing money to replace boilers, chillers, light fixtures. It's a performance-based contract, so over the life of the loan, which is 15 years,
Okay.
it pays you back in energy savings. So, the issue is sometimes up front, you're not going to see the energy savings year 1 and 2, but as you go, it's a long-term investment. So as you go down the road by year 12, 13, 14, 15, you're seeing a substantial amount of savings that actually pays back the debt service that you're paying plus
I understand.
extra. So and the second one is school security. So we did not make any cuts in the school security area, and that is where those
Oh.
individuals are budgeted. So
Under maintenance of
you're restoring
plans, school
furlough.
security.
You're restoring furloughs for those individuals. That's why you're seeing an increase.
I see.
And we did not cut any FTEs in security. So that's why. So those are the two main drivers of that increase.
Okay. And it's just fine for any of the questions answered today not to be responded to in writing.
Thank you. Yeah, and so you know, back to the energy performance, this is phase 3 of a project that's been going on since 2006, and we saw about a $6 to $7 million savings in just in utilities alone last year from the previous projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins. Mr. Burrows?
Dr. Hyde, I really want to thank you, Ms. Stansky, and your staff for hearing the board and hearing the community in regards to the ROTC program in Evening High School. I really appreciate you going back to the table, going back to the drawing board to suit the need. Can you please explain the new reconstruction of the high school consortium?
With the area reorganization, the way we see it, Mr. Burrows, is that right now we have one assistant superintendent who manages all the high schools. Right. And in that are some instructional directors. So there will be these directors who will supervise one director will supervise about half the principals, the other will supervise the other half. Mm-hmm. One of the associate superintendents will take the responsibility of high school athletics, will report directly to them. But we have Gear Up, which is that college readiness grant. We have the extension of AVID. We have AP, IB, all the functioning in the high school consortium will now move under curriculum and instruction. And I think there's a valid argument that programs that are instructionally based really should reside under Dr. Whitehead, because then we see we think a stronger link to coordination. So in the reorg, there will be, we had a program called Special Programs in C&I. We're eliminating that, and basically we're converting that name from Special Programs to College and Career Ready, and that way we'll be able to link the C&I people with the direct work that's going on in high schools. And that also goes to our thought about vertical alignment. So the rigor of an AP course or an IB course, now we can drive that deeper into middle school and elementary school.
Absolutely. I think that's a very wise decision. And also, can you please explain the technical adjustment to reading recovery?
Earlier, so when we had costed it out, we were using average salaries. When we went back, you know, and looked at it, those teachers tend to make a higher salary. Right. So by eliminating the program, you save more money. So we had cost savings initially of $3 million. Mm-hmm. Looking back at it, it's now the savings is roughly $4.5 million.
So this isn't an adjustment to restore the program, but just an adjustment.
No, but as Dr. Height said, we're working with the state to, you know, allow to use title dollars in our Title I schools to, but we haven't heard back from them whether that's, you know, that's possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Ms. Waller?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and certainly to the staff. I know you all are on overload, and the community is on overload, the board is on overload. Under the Title I program, we're reducing Title I employees. In a lot of our schools inside the Beltway, and also in a number of our schools where we have minority populations, I'm concerned about the cuts affecting the families and our students insofar as the academics concerned and the needs of the family. For instance, we no longer have parent liaisons, case closed. However, we have a large population, various events are going on that are affecting public safety, security inside the schools, around the neighborhoods, and we're cutting front office staff. What are we going to be doing at these schools where we have our neediest populations? How are we going to shore up what's going to happen with our Title I schools in these areas?
Ms. Waller, one of the reasons for the proposal is to shift more money to those schools for the purposes you just described. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So last year, we used to, as a Board of Education, we used to support parent liaisons across the system. We found other mechanisms to transition that cost to the schools. And then we have 43 schools with parent liaisons because they're using the local funds for the purpose of meeting the needs at their individual schools. And many of them are in the schools that you just described. And so this would allow us to provide more resources at the school level to meet their individual needs as opposed to individuals. And it's not to suggest that the individuals have not been helpful at central office, not by any stretch of the imagination. However, it's really important that as we go through this process to eliminate funds on that general fund side, we're trying to support those families that are most in need through some of the direct grants like Title I. So we're trying to push more money to schools.
So how are we getting the word out to these families and to our communities that we have the resources there, we're going to be there for you? I know the word, the position ombudsman came up. Is that any way interrelated into this? What are we actually going to be doing? I mean, that's a major concern. And for instance, our high schools are not Title I, right, but we have public safety issues, and we're cutting down on staff that's going to be there to help curtail some of these public safety issues that are ongoing in these schools, or even the perception. And I need to understand, when you said you're not cutting security personnel, but it's not always the security personnel that's enough personnel, security personnel in these schools.
Yeah, so I'm gonna come back to the Title I, and then I'll work through security. So the point with moving the resources to the schools is so that the schools are closer to the families that need these resources than central office is, and that we want schools to be able to be responsive to the needs of their families and their communities. And so the thought is that they will communicate some of these resources directly because they have the students and the family members right there in their building. The other, with respect to security, one of the reasons we're not cutting security is because we understand how critically important it is to be responsive to things that are going on inside and around many of our schools, particularly our high schools, but it's also in how we use the information we receive. A lot of the data we receive about incidents, how we deploy staff, how do we move staff to, or readjust staff based on incidents that are occurring in and around the community. So that becomes a broader, more comprehensive approach to problem solving. We're going back to this notion about problem solving based on data. And we have data available. It's what do we do in response to those data to make sure that if schools have what they need to meet the needs of their families or of security or any other need that emerges.
And, we have this term, degree advancement. And, of course, we have our nationally board certified teachers, which I admire them. I applaud them for what they're doing, the stipends that, we want to give them. However, I have a major concern about if we're not giving our other teachers who are getting their masters and their doctorates and working to enhance what they're doing in the classroom, I have a major concern about what message are we sending to them, and then what are we doing to retain or tie these national board certified teachers to stay here in our school district. When I talk to some of the teachers and they tell me, well, you all are not doing this, you're not doing that, you're not doing the other, and we could get this if we go somewhere else. Well, my thing is, well, we have other teachers who are working just as hard as you all are, and they're not threatening to leave us. I want upward mobility for everyone. I think everyone should be able to do what they need to do, but I have a concern that we're not being equitable in what we're doing for all of our teachers. I think what we do for one set of teachers, we need to do for the other, and yes, we want highly qualified, certified teachers to get this extra, certification. I think it's wonderful. I think it's marvelous. But how realistic is it for that all of our teachers are able to do it, especially when you have newer, younger teachers coming in, they have families, they're working, and they're not able to get anything to help them with their education, and they could go ahead and leave Prince George's County Schools and go to work somewhere else also. What are you going to do? What can you tell us we're going to do for the majority of our teachers that work to become highly qualified and certified?
Well, one of the things, Ms. Waller, we're trying to do to lessen the impact is not furlough them again. We're trying to do that for all of our staff members. The other thing is so this is actually, I think, the wrong conversation. And I think it's the wrong conversation because we pay a lot of individuals for the attainment of something, and we pay them forever for that attainment. And we don't treat the value that they add with respect to student outcomes as a part of that decision. And so part of this is looking at, as we go into negotiations, really looking at a compensation structure that says, how do we get the most highly qualified and capable teachers in front of all students, but in particular the most disadvantaged students? So how do we do that first? And then how do we value or show value to those who are really generating the most value or the largest difference for our students? So how do we reward that? How do we match individuals to certain places? I think our current compensation structure gives incentives for certain things that they obtain. Degree advancement, certain certifications, and all of those things become important, but to the degree that they actually add value to what students are learning and taking away from a class experience, I'm not so sure all do. So the question becomes, how do we create a structure that incentivizes the right actions on our educators' part, gets them in front of the most needy students, and keeps them here? And how do we recruit the right people? How do we retain the right people? And how do we build capacity of everyone and then allow our compensation structure to really be more directly associated with that, as opposed to, so I earn this degree and I get paid this difference forever, although I've only earned it once. And so I think that has to become the new conversation about how do we have a compensation structure that really recognizes teaching as the core of what we want to do moving forward.
How are we going to maintain keeping our teachers? And I'm sorry, I'm way over. I want to ask some more questions maybe.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry. Ms. Beck.
I need some clarification on which proposal is on the table now, because we've had some shifting in terms of proposals. The ROTC, the original proposal was the 5 sites. So that's now off the table for the reduced instructors at all sites.
Yeah, this is an adjustment, Ms. Hathaway Beck. So the proposal is still a reduction in ROTC, but it's at every site now.
Okay, so we can confidently tell the public that there will be an ROTC program at every school?
Yes.
Okay.
And Ms. Beck, the budget worksheet, spreadsheet that I sent the board,
The tool?
the column, there's the tool and then there's a budget worksheet. The column on the left is our actual proposal as of today.
Okay. The media aids, I think that needs a little more discussion, because that was going from, it was eliminating 90, but now it's transitioning half of them into, from media specialists to media aides.
So That was an alternative proposal.
Okay.
So again, the proposal on the left is what we're going with. We've given the board some alternatives if they choose to want to try to amend. But I think Dr. Arias can talk a little bit about how we're going to, the proposal now is you know,
0.5
the
per school.
Well, Dr. Arias can explain how we're going to do it.
The, we actually broke it out by the school size. So schools under 250 would have a media specialist 2 days a week. Schools between 250 and 500 would have them 3 days a week. Schools above 500 would have them 0.5, and high schools would go full-time. So
Where is that? Where is that formula?
Actually sent it to Mr. Stansky about 20 minutes before this meeting started this morning. So what we're trying to do is, the original proposal was half-time everywhere. So I was trying to generate proposals after listening to public testimony. How can we be a little bit more equitable in the distribution of media specialists? The numbers still come out to about the same.
Okay, so I know that in one of my questions I referred to a chart that Mr. Belcher had done for the custodial formula change. So will we see a similar chart before we vote that shows the media?
So there is a, in the budget document from December, there's a whole section on staffing formulas. So I will get to the board Tuesday, that section revised with all the new formulas in it.
But we won't see a chart like Mr. Belcher's chart.
So
I hate to put it like that, but if you don't know the enrollment, if you're a citizen out in the community and you don't know the enrollment in your school, then you're not going to know what the formula for your media specialist assignment is.
do that. Yeah, if you want school by school for media specialists, we can
Right.
certainly do that.
And I think that's better for the media specialists too, because now they'll have to be saying, well, I'm 351, what does that mean? And these numbers are fluctuating so dramatically, you really don't know what number to use. I hate to put it like that. The Schmidt Center. For me, that has to be resolved before I vote. It can't be well, in theory, we might rent it out. In theory, we might have a MOU. I can't support the elimination of the Schmidt Center. That has to move forward, just for me. And I still don't understand why the Schmidt Center, which is $1 million, and the Owens Center, which is $2.1 million, weren't seen in tandem. Because, quite frankly, I know significantly more alumni and students who go to the Schmidt Center than the Owens Center. And I don't want to appear like I'm, throwing the Owens Center on the table, but I don't understand the rationale why one and not the other.
We can talk about the rationale, Ms. Hathaway Beck, but right now, the Schmidt Center, because we don't have an alternative proposal, is up for elimination.
Right.
So that hasn't changed. And we were trying to find some alternatives, and I'm not so sure we're going to have that before the board has to vote on this, on the budget. But we could not find a mechanism to provide for that resource for the Schmidt Center before today. And so we have some proposals that we are pursuing, but I'm not so sure that's going to be resolved before Thursday.
And the Science Center, what was that decision?
Dwayne, you want to talk about that?
We're looking at several options for HBONs, significantly reducing services. There's a fair amount of work that goes on at HBONs that's actually through the National Science Foundation grant. So it behooves us to keep that building open in some way. So we have multiple proposals internally looking at how we can reduce staff, how we can save cost at HBONs without necessarily closing it. And frankly, we're doing the same thing with Schmidt, trying to line up different ways to do this. Is there any way to cost out lunch or when kids spend the night dinner? How can we save cash that way? Putting all transportation, changing the fee structure. So we've laid out multiple proposals trying to figure out what we can do to keep these operating. And we're doing the same with HBONs, frankly.
With regard to parent transportation for the specialty programs, I understand the concept, but I think in terms of some of our centers are going to need some dramatic facility renovations, and I'm looking at Goddard in particular. They have a problem even getting the buses in and out because there's one access, the loop, and one access. So if you're having parents bring 900 kids up that one street, then I'm seeing we're going to have to blacktop the entire playground because that just is not going to facilitate all these cars dropping all these kids off. And so while I understand, that's a cut on the table, a lot of work needs to go on behind the scenes if we're still going to use that facility. Yeah, okay for now.
Yeah, and I can say that we're still, Ms. Hathaway Beck, we're still looking at how do we deliver the services that we do inside of this budget proposal. It would be optimal to have all of the responses to every little nuance, and that's a big nuance, but every problem that will likely emerge. But we're trying to find solutions now so that we can continue to offer a range of services. But some of these things we're attempting to work through, just like the Smith and Owen Center, but transportation to and from and who selects based on whatever model we come up with. If we have, you're right, if all of the parents at Goddard choose to transport their own students, then we have to figure out a way to receive those individuals at the current site. But we think that if we propose a system where there's a sliding scale, perhaps some people have also communicated to us that they would be inclined to pay a fee to continue the transportation, which means that it's not likely we would have a lot of people dropping their students off. So, but those are problems that we're attempting to work through as quickly as possible, as we're also trying to be responsive to a lot of the questions around the budget. It's just trying to do a lot in this small time period.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. As I try to facilitate, I'm always hoping that board members are going to ask questions that I have. So I just want to get some clarity on the questions that I have heard that were sort of related to. So on the last year on Reading Recovery, when we saved it with Title I funds, stimulus funds, why wasn't there a restructuring from last year to this year so that as we talk about how we're going to save that program and sustain it, if you will, that we can't even demonstrate right now that they're in the highest need schools? Or can we? Because it looked like the numbers that
they're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as you answer that question,
okay.
Dr. Hite, also going to some of what Ms. Waller was talking about in terms of the National Board Certification, certified teachers. So clearly we have to recognize when we have highly trained persons in our school district. Are you able to answer whether or not our National Board Certified teachers are in the highest need areas?
No, they're not. They're not either.
Okay, so they're our most talented. I mean, based on in terms
right.
of what we heard, they can do the best in terms of outcomes, student outcomes, and not so separate the I got a higher degree and it's not associated with my students' performance. So, I mean, from one year to the next, I would have thought that we would have had a better feel and fix to that situation. And then now, going forward, when you're saying that Title I money may be able to be used, I guess my question would be, would that mean that the 17 that we have currently in Title I would be the only ones that are saved? Or would we take that other 35 and put those in schools where kids have the highest need?
Yeah, once you apply the Title I funding to that, Madam Chair, then it would it would mean only certain schools are
You
eligible.
have to, right?
Right, and last year with stimulus, it did not save all of the read and recovery. Remember, we were cutting only a portion of them, and that portion were in some of the high-need schools. So stimulus responded to those 17 who were in the high-need schools.
And then we just paid for the others.
And then the others were not up for a cut anyway. And now, because all are up for elimination, we would have to look at applying that same standard across all reading recovery teachers, which means that it would go to our highest need schools. With respect to the National Board certification, that becomes a subject of negotiations or product of negotiations. Right now, it just has the stipend attached. And I agree that in order to earn a stipend like that or any other stipend, quite frankly, you should be associated with high-need areas, but that becomes a product or a discussion around negotiations.
Okay, and then I think one of my colleagues asked at the last meeting, are you able to, and if it takes too much time, I understand, but are you able to look at National Board Certification over the past 3 to 5 years and tell how many teachers actually went through the program and process and actually went through that and then are still here, didn't leave right afterwards? I mean, we don't have a 3-year requirement that you stay or anything like that, do we?
No, but I think we have that information, Madam Chair.
Okay.
We do. We can get that for you pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you. And then on pension, if we were able to provide a pension incentive, is the state rule, what's the formula? Is it the high 2 years or 3?
Highest 3.
Highest 3 years. So, and it's full years, right? So if I just got a raise what month are we in? February. So if I just got a raise in December, and I choose to accept the option, it's going to be on the highest full 3 years, not just from a pension, an increase in salary that I got in December.
I don't want to speak out of school. I'd have to get you the exact way that they do the formula.
Okay. All right, thank you. Oh, and one last question. Looks like I got maybe 30 seconds. Ms. Boston asked about the middle school sports potential for fee-based. I mean, realistically, can we have a fee-based system that reaches $800,000 or whatever the number was? And I think, because I don't want...
No, we will not.
Okay.
We could have a fee base that will offset some of the costs, but we will not have a fee that will eliminate the full amount.
Okay.
But it may be looking at the after-school activities differently, too, Madam Chair, so that they actually compete more internally as opposed to interscholastically, which is less expensive than if they have a competitive structure, as they do now.
Thank you. I'll come back to a couple more questions I have. Mr. Armwood.
Thank you for the additional information and this presentation today. In regards to the area organization, one of the consistent complaints we have is about customer service and responsiveness, and I'm hearing that the ombudsman is no longer on the table. Is that correct?
No, it's included as the reorg, Mr. Armwood.
It's included as a reorg.
Yes.
A related question, but not directly, is when it comes to community outreach and being responsive to businesses and community groups, right now we have only, I think, the director of student services responding to those requests and offers to get involved in our school system. How can that be also addressed? Because I've heard that comment recently that these still are business organizations and groups are still finding it difficult to reach into the schools. Another idea, this is just a thought when we were talking about the Schmidt Center. You mentioned redoing the meals. The thought occurred to me when I was in Boy Scouts, we had our parents prepare meals to take on camping trips as an assignment. And just the thought that we could push some of that onto the parents, where you show up and you have your meat or vegetables wrapped in a foil, and fifth graders should be able to learn a lot from just that experience and taking that expense off of us. Just a thought. My next question, I'm beginning to believe that we need to simply consider transportation as a necessary cost of doing business in this county. Our county is too wide and too diverse, and while we should invest in, implement some fee-based systems, I do not see how we're going to be able to move to a hub system safely. There's too many questions, and we're being asked to vote on something where there are no firm answers on the definition of what a hub will be, how we're going to address the parents being able to safely get into the schools, safety of students. And what alternatives do we have to these changes to transportation? If we were to keep transportation as it is, more or less, what can we cut in its place? And I would also like you to explain what will be restored in this budget specifically if we get the additional $20 million worth of funding that we're asking for from the state.
Class size is on the last one, Mr. Umwood. If in fact we receive the $20 million from the state, because we also have in the proposed budget an increase in class size by 2 across the system, and we were trying to limit the impact to high schools with respect to that. But the transportation cost would be $8 million, and one of the reasons it's still contained inside of the budget, the Specialty Center transportation is an $8 million price tag. One of the reasons it's still inside of the budget is because we could not find a viable way to find the $8 million from some other sources, and that's one of the reasons we proposed the 2 alternatives to the board. But the proposal is that it be eliminated. And so then we would listen to many of the comments as you were and try to come up with options or alternatives to that. And so the fee-based system and or the hub system were our attempt to create some alternatives. Oh, and then the final question, it was a question earlier about the business organizations. One of the reasons we've tried to establish the Office of Business Partnerships is so that businesses have that place to go, so that it funnels, it will be one place for businesses to go that are interested. And we have to just continue to get the word out through many of the business organizations that currently exist, that now we have an office where if they want to engage with the school system, they can work through that office.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armwood. Okay, Ms. Eubanks.
Yes, good morning. And I as well am, I feel a little better. There's so much going on, but I feel a little better that we are slowly getting there, not as fast in getting our questions answered. I wait as well to see what my colleagues are asking, since I'm still in a learning mode, and I have no problem in saying that. I don't claim to know everything. I'm learning, and I think a lot like I think the parents looking at us think. So I want to know what is the bottom line. Basically, I want to know what is the bottom line. But I'd like to start here. In reference to reading recovery. No, I'm going to skip that because that was just answered. I'm sorry. Let's go to the half-day pre-K. And I've heard all of the comments and the concerns about half a day. I as well have a concern with that. And I know that we have to offer pre-K because of the COMAR. It has to be offered. But if it's going to be offered, but people cannot afford to get their kids there, and we're spending money and the classes aren't as full as they should be, how do we, how do we handle that? That's a question and a concern of mine, because I as well, I live in Prince George's County, but at that time, My ex lived in Washington, D.C. I allowed him, which I didn't want to, but I allowed him to put the children in schools in D.C. because we weren't together and I had to work. And there was no way that I could take care of my children and they be in school for half a day. So that's a serious concern. And we all know that the first years of life is when they're more sponges. So if any time they need to be there for a longer period of time, it's in those earliest years because they learn more. That's a concern. And the second thing for me would be in reference to the communications office. And it's not just about what we portray or what we look like on the outside. We need to find out communication-wise how people are going to get the real message. Like we're asking all these questions here, that's been a problem, not just here in Prince George's County, but in government, period. Getting down to the nitty-gritty. What does it mean to me? When it comes to my household, what are all of the decisions you're making that have to do with my life and my children? What is it going to mean to me? And I also, in reference to what is going to happen with the Science Bowl, what is going to happen with SAT prep, and what about training students in the way of communications? Yeah, just to be more detailed, because it seems like we're just pulling answers. We don't want to pull answers. If we just get everything out, then we can go to what's next. That's it.
Ms. Eubanks, to address the pre-K issue, we absolutely agree with everything that you said around pre-K, that it's important that children have these opportunities. It would be wonderful to expand rather than curtail the opportunities that's on the proposal. I don't really have a suggestion to offer to go to full-time pre-K or to even expand pre-K to all the children who would desire it, because we don't serve all our 4-year-olds. So that is creating a fair amount of angst for us.
Mr. Eubanks, on the communications, and part of this is, just like with pre-K, you're right about that as well. I mean, and this budget represents the best of a lot of bad choices. I mean, and none of these choices are easy for us, but the fact still remains we have to eliminate a $155 million deficit. And we're attempting to do that and say that we're going to continue to prepare students for college and careers, looking really at protecting classrooms. The truth of the matter is we can no longer operate as we've operated in the past in any division. And so that, like JROTC, like some of the transportation, everybody is impacted in this, including communications. Now, it does become, how do we do those things with fewer staff? And what do we not do? And there are a lot of things inside of many divisions that we do now that we will not be able to continue, but it's also preparing all of our stakeholders for the fact that some of these things we just can no longer do because there's a significant budget deficit that we're trying to close.
Another question, something I forgot. What about the Head Start program?
Head Start is not impacted in any of the budget cuts. It's federal grant, and it will continue as is.
But
let me just...
With the Head Start program, is there any way that they, because it's federal, that they can take...
I just want to make sure it's clear. There is stimulus money associated with Head Start that is funding classrooms that is cut for FY12.
As well.
Just so we're clear. But the regular Head Start grant is still fully funded.
Right. And if to expand Head Start offerings would have to come out of the general fund.
Okay. Just so everybody will be aware.
Thank you, Ms. Eubanks. Colleagues, we're going to sort of go into round two. Mr. Burrows?
Actually, my question was about pre-K, and I wanted to actively advocate to restore pre-K, and I know that we're in a tough budget time, and that's difficult, but are there any other areas that would give us the same, any other, pre-K is 10 million? 10 million. Is there another area that could possibly amount to $10 million? But before you answer that, I do want to recognize two elected officials. Senator Curry is here, and also the Honorable Jacob Cogman is here, PGRAS Vice President.
Again, in the spreadsheet we submitted to the board, they're alternative 1 and alternative 2 type proposals. But, you know, we feel like, given the amount of money, $9 million is a lot of money. That and again, this is a great program, but again, it's one that we receive no state funding for whatsoever.
Right.
And it's one of those where the rest of the state does half day, and we just, again, it's one of those we'd love to do full day, but our revenue structure just doesn't allow us to support it.
With the specialty schools transportation, I actually talked to some parents at one of the Montessori schools in Oxon Hill, and she absolutely supported paying for the bus and supported the sliding scale. So I just wanted to speak in favor of that there are parents who are willing to pay to bus their students. And my last question, so in communications, we obviously cannot provide, we don't have enough money to keep the department with 20 employees. I understand that. But we have a lot of talented students who want to go into communications, who want to cover stories, who want to be a camera technicians and work at a studio. I would like to see a system where, and we have some high school programs that support that work. I would like to see our communications office work with the high school students so that while we can't put them on staff, understand that, but just so they can have that experience and just so that they can complete the work. I feel like that would be a huge support to the communications office, and that would also begin to build their resume, build their capacity for whatever field they want to go in. Not just communications, IT is another area that students are very interested in. We can't put them on staff, and honestly, I don't think they could do it without getting paid, and they would be okay with it because they like the field, they want to go into the field, and this could help build their capacity. And when we talk about the profile of a graduate, making our students work ready, I think this is what we're talking about.
Mr. Burrows, to that point, I do think that communications does a good bit of that now. They have a lot of student interns who are there. I've written a couple recommendation letters to students who are working with communications. But to your point, I do think that we could provide some of the support that we would miss with the reduction by using students and by using school-based laboratories or equipment in order to help construct some of those stories or some of those programs like SAT prep and some others. There are opportunities to do that, and that's inside of some of the secondary school reform work as well.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Colleagues, I just want to acknowledge that we have our State Senator Ulysses Curry from District 25 in the audience. Thank you so much for joining us today. And earlier, I didn't mention the fact that we also have the county's budget person back there, but I didn't want to really put him on the spot. But since he's sitting behind the senator now, we'll put him on the spot. We want more money. Okay. Next is Ms. Higgins.
Thank you very much. I'm back to looking at revenue. We had talked about a savings of absent without leave to be about 800,000 to $1 million. Is that included in any of these numbers?
Yeah, so we had to add in the proposed budget just on substitute costs, probably $4.5 million. we would have added $5.5 million without this policy.
Okay, so that's been taken care of. The Title I funds that we're hoping, and don't have a final answer at, might be available for reading recovery, would that then limit the school? I understand reading recovery addresses those first graders who are the most difficulty reading. So by having Title I funds, we would be able to address those children who have the most, first graders, most trouble reading in schools that are Title I schools only. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So what would that number look like? Because I think you said it's 4.5 million for reading recovery. So if we were to gain back some of those monies in Title I funds, what would our number look like? Am I clear? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're clear. And again, it would
Assuming
it would
it's a
be
yes.
the option of the principal to choose
Yes,
to have reading
okay.
recovery. So I can't sit here and say how many of those FTEs would be restored.
Okay.
But, you know, with the allocation that the schools get, they could choose to purchase a reading recovery. And
Okay.
again, that's something that has to be approved by the feds, the federal government and the state government for us to.
My question's a little different in that right now we're saying that the reading recovery is a $4.5 million program. If Title I schools opted to use the reading recovery, then what would that mean in terms of what our cost would be? No, for the other,
Zero.
for the remaining?
Zero.
No, I'm not clear. So you're saying that all our reading recovery would be totally in
Title I.
Title I, and we would have the same number of staff addressing
No.
the same number of children?
Want me to try?
Because we're talking about 1,000 children a year.
Exactly.
Okay.
So a typical elementary school might get $300,000 in Title I funding.
Okay.
The principal could choose to divert some of that $300,000 to pay for a reading recovery teacher. It has no impact on the general fund. It would be
Right.
how that principal decided to use his Title I funding. So now what his opportunity cost would maybe reduce class size in third grade or a data coach or whatever that principal decided how he wanted to use the Title I funds. So,
Okay.
but right now, elementary school principal is prohibited from using Title I money for a reading recovery teacher because it was general funds in this fiscal year. What the superintendent is recommending is to go to the federal government and allowing
that
us a
option.
waiver to the supplanting.
Okay. But given the modest amount of money that a principal has for Title I and the other priorities as well, for principals universally to make that decision is probably unlikely.
We don't know, Ms. Higgins, because they could not do it this year. I mean, they were not allowed to. And we saw the same with the parent liaisons, and so we thought, or some thought, that principals may not use the resources in order to have or offer that resource, and many principals chose to do that. So we don't know who would use it and who may not use it, because two things that we already have. We have the program already and the certified teachers in order to do reading recovery. And if you have that pool of individuals who are certified in reading recovery, it could likely change for many of the principals. I can't speak for all of them,
Okay.
but it could change.
Thank you.
And I did want to add that if a Title I school currently has reading recovery, there would actually be less cost to maintaining that position because you don't have the material cost. The materials will already be in the building. So a principal who's already has reading recovery, a Title I principal, is probably more likely to keep that position.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins. Ms. Beck?
Are we out of compliance with COMAR if we don't offer all 10 of the world languages?
No.
No. So can we see a recommendation to scale back on world languages to save some money? We're currently 165 FTEs for $13.5 million, and it says in one of the reports that several are under-enrolled or difficult to staff. Thank you. Next. One of the responses to French immersion program and Montessori detailed the costs. Is Montessori truly twice as expensive, or it said that the two French immersion programs have 15 FTEs. and the 3 Montessori programs have 40 FTEs. This was a follow-up that I had sent on Sunday, looking to see the staffing of each individual program rather than batching them by French immersion and Montessori. The Montessori program is $2.2 million. I'm not saying eliminate these in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying there's a confusion with regards to the data that
Right,
was.
and I think, let me provide some clarity verbally initially, and then I'll come back in writing. I think the way we had Montessori coded was every teacher in that building is coded to Montessori. So those middle schools have a standard staffing formula, and then they get additional staffing based on because they're a specialized program. And I think what you're seeing is the additional staffing in French immersion, but then we're capturing everybody in Montessori. So what I need to go back to get you is what the additional for each program is. And then also though, Montessori has pre-K, whereas French immersion does not. So there's probably some additional staffing in Montessori because of the pre-K component, whereas French immersion does not have a pre-K program.
I just thought it was odd that French immersion, both programs only had 15 FTEs.
And I think, again, that's the additional staff that the formula provides on top of the normal staffing formula that those programs have.
Right.
But I'll definitely follow up with you in writing on that one.
Okay, that's part of my questions that I said, my midnight questions from Sunday night. Remember those? Also part of that is the cell tower discussion, where we're promoting that we might get 1.2 to 2.1 million for cell towers this year, whereas the contract we signed with Milestone said 2.5 million over 5 years. There's a disconnect there, and being as a lot of us are in Annapolis on that cell tower bill, having two separate numbers I found to be confusing. The board action summary for Milestone said 2.5 over 5 years.
The board action summary was based upon the maximum potential recovery if all of the potential sites that were identified were actually approved by the board. So I think the revised estimate, gives a range in the event that, there isn't the community or board support for all of the sites. So the 2.5 represented the maximum potential revenue generation.
Okay, well, the information we were given in the follow-up on the board questions that have already been responded to said the anticipated revenue for this coming year is 1.2 to 2.1 for 1 year, not 5 years. So that would quadruple the original estimate.
Yeah, but the point of clarification would be, though, that's all dependent upon how quickly the approval process occurs. So I don't think that we can give any guarantees this morning, certainly, that, all of those sites that are potential, candidates for cell phone towers are going to move forward. It really depends upon how quickly the community review process can occur and how quickly the recommendations can come to the board.
I do have that as a follow-up, Mr. Stansky, just to get a tighter number for when we're up in Annapolis on the cell tower issue, but that's going to be a wash if the bill passes, so there is that issue too. I did have questions also about Green Valley and the staffing. The staffing just seems rather flush, is that the term? For building maintenance for 83 children in the building. That just looked odd. Thank you. Was that a yes?
No, we're getting that information, Ms. Hathaway, back. But the Green Valley, we are not just looking at the building maintenance costs, but just the total staffing inside of that facility as well. I think we have to review all of our smaller programs like that, just as we move forward.
And a clarification to maybe Dr. Arbogast, there is a media specialist at Green Valley. So would would that be a high school position that would remain?
Hadn't thought of it, but I will now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. Ms. Johnson.
Dr. Hyde, what I want to explore with you at this time is the new PGCPS, what it looks like. We're not going to have furloughs. You are working to right-size the district. Deployment of staff is clearly going to be very critical to get that staff that is the right staff in the right place. It doesn't mean just getting rid of people. It might even, in some cases, mean hiring one or two or more. So what I need to ask you is, where in this budget that you're presenting, not these changes, where is money being applied for change management work? For staff to be able to understand the changes that are going to be here, the business entity of PGCPS. The second piece of that has to do with change management with regard to effective teaching. That is absolutely what has to happen so that boredom, ennui in this system is eliminated. We have to deal with that. Where in the budget is there an application of funding of some degree to that? Because we're compensating our staff appropriately as it should be, but there's also a commitment. Change is going to happen, it will happen, but we need to be about the business of helping to direct that change and a comfort level. And lastly, please respond to, we have so many things that have happened in Prince George's County that families have come to depend on, but there was never a sustainability plan. Transportation to specialty programs being an example. We cannot continue to operate with doing great things, providing to children and families, and then down the road, when we come to a bus cycle, we have to take it away. It is very disheartening. So I ask you, what part of this budget, what amount of money are you applying to risk manage sustainability work and planning around any new services or programs that you're going to bring into the county? My last point is, I believe transportation at this very late hour, I would recommend a half step toward either elimination or full implementation, but it has to be sustainable. So I would say a hub system has to happen. We have to partner perhaps with the county to run the bus from the communities to get children to a bus lot, something, but we can't just take it and leave them with nothing. If we do payment for service rendered, again, it's too late to implement that kind of dynamic, even though many school districts in the country, they do have fee-based or children ride the public transportation. So I ask that in a general sense, where in the budget, I can get that answer by whenever, before I have to vote, but I need to see that. That's important. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And to your question, it's not the allocation of additional dollars for some of these things. It's the avoidance of elimination for these dollars in some places. In other places, it's work that has begun through partnerships with grants, like the performance management grant has been instrumental in allowing us to use data to make some of these decisions in a more informed way. If you talk about what a district should look like moving forward and where is that contained in the budget, and here's one thing that I believe. I believe that if we're able to get highly capable, highly effective teachers in front of students across our system, irrespective of where students attend school, irrespective of circumstances of poverty, if we have a highly capable and a highly effective teacher in front of students, we can impact our system, we can impact the lives of children. And I think, so that has to be the core piece of this work moving forward. And a budget is reflecting that by not further burdening teachers who've already seen the reduction of salary and furloughs, reduction of salary and removal of stipends and differentials, increased class sizes. So that's where that exists inside of the budget. We also know in order to attract, to build the capacity to develop and to retain highly effective teachers, we also need to have a focus on our school-based leadership or administrators, in particular the principals. And you can see that it wasn't a recommendation inside of the budget really to reduce the number of principals, because we really want to build, develop their capacity and make sure we have a sustainable model for doing that over the next several years. To your point about the sustainability question, and the sustainability question really began a couple of years ago when we, number one, went to position control, because we didn't have a mechanism for controlling the number of positions and matching them to a budget code 3 years ago. But now we do. And now tying that budget process to our strategic planning process becomes critically important as well, which means that as we talk about capital improvement, as we talk about addressing the issues associated with students who need more resources, how do we build that into a more comprehensive structure so that we're not just adding this year, taking away next year, adding again the following year? How do we build a long-term structure to ensure that those positions, that we're able to sustain those positions and those priorities? The other part of this is really the question, and I keep coming back to this notion that if we are funded based on the enrollment or per pupil, and the number of students we've had have declined over the past years, it means that either we have to reduce or contract in size or find monies from some other place to address that difference. And we haven't been able to find the money from some other place, so it means that we have to then really contract so that the number of students matches more closely the number of individuals that we have working in positions. And so this notion of right-sizing the system will allow us to move forward with a structure that is more foundational, if you will, so that it's not every year we're coming back to the table talking about $50 million in cuts that we have to make. Now, if we have next year, if the state comes back and says, okay, we're going to cut you $50 million, then we're going to still have to find that anyway. But it's not going to be a function of reducing students, because next year, for the first time in a long period of time, we would have, if this budget is approved, positions that really match enrollment. And I think that that goes a long ways to really determining or creating a size or a structure inside of our system that we're able to fund with the resources we receive from the state and from the county.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Foster?
I have a couple of questions. Of course, I'm back on the transportation part for the specialty schools, because this is, as you know, an item that is causing me a lot of concern. Do we have any type of hub system that the county or we're using here in the school system at all at this present time?
I'm going to ask Mr. Dotson to respond to that. I'm not aware of one, Ms. Boston, but Mr. Dotson may be.
Good morning. At this present time, we don't have a concept that's centered around a hub system at all.
Okay. Do you know of any of our surrounding counties that use the hub system, and if they do, have we checked in how they operate in the system?
We have done some exploratory research on that, and there are districts in the state that do it, but they're much smaller than we are. Their enrollment is smaller, and their ridership numbers are very small compared to Prince George's County.
Because the hub system sounds great, but it's something about it that when I think about our younger children, that have to ride, because some of, our specialty schools, we have kindergartners, and I think the safety of that is the part of the hub concept that doesn't sit too well, or something that we really have to address. And I agree with my colleagues here that we really need to see something, we really need to see more detail about how you're going to offer this hub or the transportation process, because that's just a critical part. Have we looked at, I know we did it a couple of years ago, and it caused a lot of heartburns for a lot of our communities and citizens, but we seem to have quite a few schools that have low population right now, less than, 350, less than 300. Have we looked into consolidating some of these schools at some point, or these students where, because we're talking about low enrollment in a lot of these schools. Have we looked into that process again?
Yes, you're going to receive a presentation soon about one of the groups that are doing a resource mapping, and they're going to describe how much more just small schools cost, just in general, and that a number that we should be targeting is around 350. And looking at the number of schools that we have below 350, and right now I believe that number is 22 that we have below 350. But that would be, that we would have to work that into another round of boundary changes, and inside of board policy, we would have to begin that process for FY 13 pretty soon. We would have to begin the conversations about another boundary conversation in terms of consolidating their small schools. And that's also a part of this critical conversation about right sizing the district, because the small schools, and some are by design, Ms. Boston, and some are by enrollment. And so the ones by design, Mrs. Hathaway Beck talked about Green Valley. Okay, that's by design, but is that design yielding the results that we need? And can we do that with a different approach? So we have to look at the ones by design. And then, to your question, or to your point, then they're the ones based on boundaries, and really looking at boundaries inside of those. And the other part of that question is where those schools are located now, and what spaces are available to accommodate students.
I had one more, if you're going to look concerning the pre-K. If we go to a half a day pre-K, AM and PM, I just don't see where it's going to be a big savings to us, because if you do half a day in AM and then you do PM, then you're getting back into transportation, then we're spending more money on transporting these children back and forth from your AP and AM and PM programs.
Right. So in the cost savings, $9 million, there's $2 million built in for increase of transportation costs. But again, just to give you a basic example of how it would work is, so right now if you have a school with 2 pre-K classes of 20 kids each, it would just, those 40 children would then be taught by one teacher, 20 of them in the AM, 20 of them in the PM, whereas currently they're taught by 2 teachers and 2 paraprofessionals. So it's basically, the way to serve the students is just cut in half. But we did build in an extra $2 million extra for transportation for those students.
So it's pretty much going to offset between.
No, so the savings just in the staff was around 11 million, but we only put in the savings of 9 million because we're anticipating increased transportation costs.
Thank you, Ms. Boston. Mr. Armwood?
In trying to think of solutions and not just cuts, I want to ask the question, how can the board be more involved in helping the system provide customer service and support? I'm talking about board members is it possible for board members to be more proactive in taking information from our constituents without interfering with the administration of the school system? And should the ombudsman report to the board as opposed to the administration, since an ombudsman by definition stands kind of outside the administration to solve problems?
So as it currently stands, Mr. Armwood, and I think that's a great question, because I think we have to look at then what has been the practice of the system. And I think when we typically get concerns, many people will begin at the school level, and we feel like problems that are solved closest to where they occur are solved faster than any of the others. But what typically happens is that people have grown accustomed to just kind of elevating the problem to the highest level, and then we work back the other way. And in our attempt to work back the other way, then we have and involve a lot of staff in doing that. So to your first question, I do think that trying to move the problem back to as close to where the problem exists. I'll give you an example. So if it's a problem with a classroom teacher, then the principal is a more appropriate place to resolve that. And the principal will likely say, let's get the teacher inside of this conversation. But we get a lot of those that go to the board office or come to my office, and then we have to work backwards. And staff is spending a lot of time on those types of issues. I'm less interested in the position. I talked about ombudsman-like position. I'm more interested in our ability to solve a person's problem with the fewest points of contact possible, so that individuals can make a phone call, and people are going to stay with them to the point that their problem is solved, as opposed to sending them here, and then that place sends them somewhere else, and then each place is giving them a different response. So we're trying to streamline the points of communication for how problems are solved, and then what principals can do, how we get those informations, how we get all of those problems back to the schools so that they're resolved at the closest possible area.
And I totally agree with that. The first question an ombudsman or a problem solver has to ask is, have you spoken to the teacher, administrator, or principal? Anybody in that position, that's always got to be the first question. But just have that single point of contact. But thank you, your response was right on.
Thank you, Mr. Armwood. Mr. Harris.
Dr. Arbogast, thank you for the new formula for media specialists. I don't know exactly where my stance is on that right now, but I do like the fact that all high schools will keep a full-time media specialist. But one of my concerns is for the elementary school and for the middle school is making sure that we have a good inventory on the resources that we have inside the libraries, and to make sure that our books are still being accounted of. The VPA program, I got a couple of calls from students saying that it was being reduced or cut. Is there any truth to this at all? And I told them maybe they were talking about the busing. But I just want to make sure the VPA program itself.
There were no reductions to VPA, Mr. Harris.
And I was talking to one of the senators last week, and they said, well, back in the day, and I guess this is for Ms. Schilling, back in the day, the Chamber of Commerce used to work with us in providing packages or incentive packages to recruit teachers to come to Prince George's County and educate. Are we doing something like that now? Is that something that's possible that we can work on doing in the future? Just want a little bit more information about that. But in the same light, this discussion about the National Board Certified Teacher stipends, I understand your reasoning why, but we're all suffering. And the way our students feel is that teachers come to work every day thinking it's a job. And the way our students look at teachers, we look at teachers the same way we look at firemen and the same way we look at police officers. We understand that, yes, they're not going to get paid as high, but they do the job because they know they're going to be making a difference for their community. And I see this in other counties, but I'm not sure that I see this in Prince George's County. So I wanted to ask you, what is the stance that you take for new employees when they come into the system? What is our mission statement when we talk to our employees? And I hope that it's something that's saying, you know, along the lines of, you know, of course students come first, but we're in a tough budget, and we need to make sure that we don't come in looking, okay, I'm gonna do my what 9 to 4 or 3:40, and then I'm out. I'm gonna put those extra hours in. I really want to put students first. Our students really are. We see that disconnect between teachers and students, and I really believe it's having an effect on our academic achievements.
And you spoke about a couple of things, Mr. Harris, and first and foremost, yes, we do all of that when we hire new teachers, and we try to create an environment where they understand the expectations for providing for students, period. Not first, but period. So this is about the development and outcomes for students. But in addition to that, there are some other constraints that are associated with that. We have a current evaluation that doesn't support that position. The evaluation instead supports primary task that we want all teachers to be exposed to. It doesn't measure the conditions inside of a school. It